Hello. um, my name's Ollie. I have a kind of very strange kind of journey through art, so I suppose I'll share that with you. I define myself as an educator and an artist. I'm London-based. I've just actually finished up being an assistant head of a special needs school, which is particular to speech and language. And you'll see kind of how that fits with what I've done, and the kind of both art and education kind of merge together in my practice and how they've helped each other. I went to art school in London. I actually went to the Slade, and was very influenced by some of the work that was going on there at that time. So you had Phila de Barlow, Bruce McLean, but I was also looking at people like John Latham and Barbara Staveni, Stephen Willits, and at the time, Bourriard and the relational aesthetics movement that was going on. I started in the painting department, but I was making a lot of sculptures and a lot of performance-based work, but really interested in the 60s, 70s social practice that was going on in the UK especially, and really trying to understand my place within that, but also the politics that go into teaching and sharing education, and the fact that we still have grades and crits, and what that means as an artist and as an educator, and so on and so forth. So I was kind of playing with those sorts of ideas while I was there. So to kind of give you an idea of what sort of things I was doing, in the top left-hand corner, you've got me. I was part of a group that they defined as Shit System, which wasn't the best name, I have to say, but that's the name that they decided. That's the problem with groups. Collaboration always, everyone has to be pleased, and therefore nobody's ever pleased. So this was a performance that we did in the Whitechapel Cafe, and it was about how people interact. So I made a tub of custard and a tub of hummus, and I offered people this custard and hummus dilemma, so they could choose one or none of them. So that was kind of, it's trying to play and make fun, but also a lot of my work is about language and how people interact with art, and what responses they get and why they get the responses that they get, which kind of flowed into the education stuff that I did later. In the middle, you can see like a colorful, weird teepee kind of thing. That was actually an artwork I made for someone else. So playing with this idea of making props for artwork, but also about authorship, and this idea that I didn't create the performance, but I facilitated that person to be able to make it the best performance they could. And on the left of that, you've got the cardboard models. These were kind of models of buildings or things that I constructed for other people to make their work in or around. And you can kind of see that it's the same. The middle one is the model for the colourful one in the middle. And then on the far right.
I'm sorry to interrupt, Oliver, but I'm not seeing any of these things. All I can see is draw drawings, this project.
Ah, that's an issue. Hold on.
I don't know if other people can see it.
Yeah, I was just about to say similar, that I'm not seeing the PD, and thank you.
Let's find that then. I apologise.
Ah, yes. I can see now.
Better?
Thank you.
As you said, technology always goes wrong. So I'll start again. In the far left-hand corner, you've got myself serving the hummus and custard. In the middle, you have the colourful kind of box thing. To the left of that, you've got the cardboard models. And on the far right, I was about to talk about a collaboration I did with 3 other people, where we we masked the whole room in canvas. And it wasn't necessarily about the outcome, but it was about the process of getting to the outcome. So it was about the conversations that we were having around the artwork, how we were describing what we wanted to do and why we were describing it in that particular way. So again, talking about language, talking about communication, but also about what it means to make a painting, what it means to collaborate and share ideas, and that creative spin that comes from that. In the bottom left-hand corner, there's an artwork, a collaborative artwork. I took 9 people to Malta. So I organized a residency, but it was a very short residency. It was 9 days in Malta in this space. So it's 9 people from 9 different countries over 9 days. And there's a Caravaggio there, which is the beheading of St. John. So one of the artists really liked that idea of reusing an artwork that was there that people would understand and know, but put a spin on it. And he was really interested in football. So he recreated it in 3D as a performance, the beheading of St. John. So this is kind of my education. So when I finished at the Slade, I was really getting into this idea of collaboration and how that worked. So I wanted to take it to an educational setting. So I worked with Studio Voltaire and the Brit School, and trying to really break down how I could expand that, but for other people, not necessarily on the same wavelength as me, but to really kind of get other people involved in it. So as you can see, we were using mind maps to talk about the gift, which is another thing that kind of runs through my work. And then they would then have to explain, so them getting together in groups, trying to work out what their ideas were and conversing and finding the best way to get the best idea for all of them, and then explain it to the rest of the community. And then we gave them, I don't think it was £40, I think it was just one of the £20 each. So there's 3 groups, and they went out and they created an artwork. And this is a one-day thing. So one group took the gift idea really quite literally. So they wrapped things up, as you can see in the bottom left-hand corner. They made balloons and party hats, and they presented this present to everybody else. Another group were really interested in the NHS and the idea that they're gifting life, but the gift of helping other people. So they created a body out of all these toys, and they were exploring the idea of the body and what that meant. And then another group just got £20 worth of pennies and stuck them to the floor and painted them. So this kind of idea of, you're walking along the road and you see something that you really want and you try to pick it up and you can't pick it up. So there's a kind of play and humor in these things as well. So that kind of really stimulated me to really think about how I could use education to really get people creatively understanding what they were doing. So I actually went into secondary education. I started teaching, and I just got really disillusioned because the system is very, very heteronormative. You had to draw pictures of peppers, and that's all you could do, and that was your GCSE basically. But I was also teaching International Baccalaureate, which has a much wider expanse. So there was hope there, but I felt the system wasn't made for me, or I wasn't made for the system. So I decided to go to Australia and do my master's. And the reason for that was because it was free. So I have a New Zealand passport, so I'm able to go there, and the course was free. So I was very lucky. I got to go, and I started making works that defined the situation, but also encouraged people to understand why they were in the situation and what they could communicate, but also what creatively they could get out of the situation. So I co-opted the idea of the crit, and I gave people, I don't know if you can see in the bottom corner of the left-hand photograph, I gave people a zine, I gave them breakfast, but I also kind of made a very particular space for myself, which you can see created by these kind of quite ominous posters. So there's a duality to these things. And then I did a lot of projects that sort of kind of took this idea of the curator and this idea of helping other people to make their artworks, again, facilitating what they wanted to do. and I was looking at people like Rancière in terms of his look on education and creativity, but also cognitive awareness and cognitive abilities. I was looking at Bourdieu in terms of his kind of ideas on class and class systems and politics, but also taste and value, and how performing in somebody else's artwork, what's the value in that for the person performing, but also what's the value for the person observing, and taste, this idea of, it has to be worth something, but what's the creativity and what is that worth in the long term for our communities. I more contemporaneously was looking at Kester and Bishop and this idea of relational aesthetics and the critique of that relational aesthetics, and O'Neill and Wilson in terms of the educational turn. So how curatorialship is going towards this idea of education and using the gallery as a space for creativity and for exposing art, but also understanding art and being part of the cycle that will create more artists in the world. So that's kind of the thematic of my master's. But physically making artworks, in the bottom left-hand corner, I got a vitrine into the library of one of the universities, and I started showing work of students from that university who kind of never really had that opportunity before to show their work. I curated a show, that's the image to the right of that, in a space trying to find people that maybe wouldn't show their work, or so a lot of outsider art, again looking at people's cognitive abilities and their understanding of what they were doing and why they were doing it, taking that into the gallery and getting people to understand why make the art that they're making. In the bottom right hand corner, I started a magazine with some design students, because I was at Monash University and they merged art and design together. So a lot of the PhD students and the master's students were doing design. So it was kind of bus design all the way through to lettering and graphic design. So it's a real opportunity to kind of merge practices and see what we could kind of get out of that. In the middle, I'm recording some interviews I did in a lift as well, to kind of change the dynamic of what an interview could be, how that could look. And in the top right hand corner, I just had a very small space, and anybody could sign up for a week and they could just show an artwork. And then kind of coming to the end of my master's, in the top left hand corner, I created an artwork where I got a group of people to sit at the table, and then we had a crit on the outside. So there was people on the inside and people on the outside. And that was really important in terms of the dynamic between the people, because the people on the inside couldn't verbally talk to each other. They could only communicate through visuals. But they couldn't use any letters and they couldn't use any numbers. So they couldn't verbally speak to each other, but the people on the outside could. And the people on the inside had food, which is very important in all of my artworks, as you'll see. But they decided that they were going to solve world peace using just images. I didn't put any kind of prerequisites on how or what they had to communicate about, but this was about, they decided they were going to solve world peace. So they were being critiqued from the outside, and people were talking about what they were drawing, but they had control of the situation because they were describing, they were actually manifesting the artwork. So it's a really interesting piece in those dynamics. In the top left-hand corner, I've been using a lot of exquisite corpses. I don't know if you know what exquisite corpse is, but you get a little bit of paper and then you build on the image. But it's also, again, about taking something from somebody else and expanding on it and building on those ideas. In the bottom left was actually my final master's artwork. So I got people that I had worked with and I asked them to come into the gallery, and they distilled all of my recordings, all of my documentation. They distilled it into their own particular zines. So it's about them understanding what they had done, but also having the ability to control what that looked like and what the final artwork was. And then on the right is 2 images from an artwork I did where I collected the 100 most used words in the English language. And I gave it to a group of people and we had dinner, and then they started making poetry with the words and building up a kind of a narrative with those words. I was asked to do a show in somewhere called Seven Gallery. This is all in Melbourne in Australia. And so I decided that I was going to sell it, well, rent it more, to be more precise. So I filled it with all of my kitchenware, everything. So it was a fully functioning space. And I got a local estate agent to come in, and he rented it out for the month. This was kind of talking about the way spaces were being moved further and further out of the city centre, and they were being made into housing, gentrification of all our major cities. But it was also an opportunity for another artist to show in there. So it actually went to another artist, and she started making works inside the gallery. So there's this kind of the recycling of people and spaces, and the language around selling the language, the gallery and the artistry. This was back in the UK. This is the Bristol Biennale. So I read a story about someone who published a book just on lampposts. So he'd put bits of A4, and then everyone was rushing to see the next bit of the story. And they wanted something as a wayfinder between spaces in the show. And so I designed this book, which was for children, but it also talked about maybe the crisis of confidence that artists have, but as this child trying to grapple with this idea of being a creative and what that means. So there's 6 posters along the way that people could read and be part of the narrative. Again, looking at language, how we use language, how we use children's books, but also illustrations, and this dynamic between art and illustration and language. I also did another art poster project, which was to do with language again. This was for a magazine, but it was about particular words that we use and how they're used, and the difference between American English, Australian English, and English, well, British English, and the different meanings and the different histories that have come out of those meanings. So I really enjoyed that particular project. I had another gallery show, which was about, it was designing an app for the gallery, and people could write definitions of words that they made up, or some people used words that they had their family used, or that were familiar to them that maybe people wouldn't, outside their family, wouldn't know. So it's about proliferating language, because as an app, anybody could sign in and anybody could add to it, but it started in the gallery as an artwork. And as you can see in the bottom left-hand corner, you could put 2 different definitions, but also you could illustrate what you thought that the word was about. So this word was bourgeois, but in Australia they have a word for maybe an underclass of people, and there's a kind of an underlying joke about the middle class rising in Melbourne, so that's why I chose that particular one. And kind of back in the UK, I'm really interested in placards and protesting and language around protesting. So I gave the opportunity for people to make their own placards and then protest, using ink that I provided and the boards, and it gave them an opportunity to think about what they're interested in and the language that they could use around that, and how they feel about themselves and how they can then express that to other people. Back in Australia now, I did a lot of toing and froing. This is the OK Collective. So the OK Collector started in 2009. We had multiple projects, but this was a gallery asked us to, again, look at language, how we use language, and we were really interested in the semiotics of communication. So each day we'd use a different form of communication to express to the gallery what we were doing, and then we researched that form of communication. So in the middle you can see me with my flags, that's semaphore. So we literally made flags for people to use and to communicate, and then we taught anybody that came into the gallery how they could use semaphore. To the right of that, we were looking at smoke signals and trying to define what a smoke signal was and is, and people really enjoyed that. But as you can see, all of our work was displayed on the walls of the gallery, so anybody that could come in could really get into what we'd done previously, but also understand what we were doing that day. And that was really important. It's this education element and using the gallery as a space in which you can have a conversation, and it was really important that we were there all the time and we had that ability to communicate what was going on and why. Another show that I had was called Plays the Thing, and again trying to get children involved, a bit of fun, a bit of play. I designed all these costumes. I had a competition running, which I found people really got excited about. But the idea was you could, on the left-hand side, you can see there's a table, so you could design a set, you could write a play, and you could use the costumes that were already there. And the idea was that people could put YouTube videos up using the costumes and the set or the script that they had written, and then there was a small competition at the end. So as you can see, someone in their silver suit and the lampshade hat really got into it, so that there was a lot of fun and a lot of excitement around doing these things and getting people into galleries and understanding these maybe underused spaces and how they could use them for themselves. I got funded and I actually won an award for this one. It's called Suburban Therapy. And the idea was we had a rota of artists, and this ran from 2015 to 2017. We had a rota of artists who would quite literally pick up the cart, roll it out into the street, and they were getting paid to make their artworks in the street. But the only thing that they had to do was to get someone to sit down, and they had to gift that artwork to the person that sit down. Going back to this idea of kind of mouse and the gift, and understanding the value of artworks, a value of the artist, so all the artists were paid, and how you, but the people on the street understood their own value as well, and they had stories, they had theories, they had understandings of the world that maybe the artist didn't, and that communication was really, really important to the project. Some people just did a simple drawing. As you can see on the right hand side, there's people with a kind of tombola, and they had different images, and they put the images together depending on the kind of the answers that the person gave. And then the major event just a year before I left Melbourne was a PIC fair, which is Performance, Interaction and Collaboration. And this was a major coup for us. We got funded $30,000 to do a one-day festival. It had about 5,000 people footfall through it, and there's about 30 artists that performed. There was very kind of simple, quiet pieces, even though it was kind of a very big space. They still had a really good presence. So in the top left-hand corner, I'll go kind of left to right at the top and then the bottom. This artist would write a piece of poetry for one person, and then it would be performed on the kind of the stage that they have there. To the right of that, you had Andrew, who was really interested in seed bombing. So he was breeding native Australian plants, and he would help you to make your own clay seed bomb. So you could take that home and then plant that in your garden. He was very, very knowledgeable about the different seeds and what sort of plants they would grow, and if you could eat them or if they were flowers, etc. So it's a really, really lovely project. Again, I'm really interested in this idea of gifting and giving, and but also about people from the community getting involved in the artworks. To the right of that, we have Perform Print, who spent the whole time with their crazy, huge printing objects. So there's a kind of a tire that they'd etched into, and they were rollering paper in the street and giving it away to people as they came past to kind of get them involved. To the right of that, Rupert, Ramon, and Plastic Fork, if I remember their name, they went hoarse because they sang for the whole day and they didn't take a break at all. I didn't force them to do it in any way, shape, or form. That was their submission to the project. But it's quite scary, and they were very hoarse by the end of it. And down the bottom we had speed dating, but it was kind of had a twist where people would have pre-made questions that they'd have to ask, and obviously the answers were to do with the personality and who they were. The next one across was, it's a bit blurry, but I'm taking time here. People were stopped in the street by this kind of bungee cord, so they had to kind of stop and adhere to the rules that were going on within the artwork. And to the right of that was a huge performance by a hoopla troupe that really wanted to get involved, and then had a kind of a teaching session at the end. Do you want me to keep going, Alice, or?
Yeah, we can sign back in again. That's no problem.
Okay,
Yeah.
sure. Brilliant, thank you. This is at the Australian Centre for Contemporary Art. I put on a day's activities for children to get into the gallery. So on the right hand side, we've got the Franken clothes. So bits of clothing that the children could then tape up. They could sew together or staple together, and they could take those away. And on the right hand side, it was collaboration over collage. So they could make collages together, and there was people at the table that people that came in individually could interact with, and then there was a large painting that people could kind of interact with as well. And then this is the kind of my latest project since I've come back to the UK, and it's had many names, but it's a collaborative drawing project which I can show you a video of. And the idea is that at the end, I will have produced 100 drawings, but every cycle of 10 days, another person will join. So we started with 2 and we'll end with 10. So there'll be 10 cycles in all. So these are some of the drawings that come up. And every day we have a different word. And that the person who's responsible for the word changes every day. So these are some of the things that come out, and they've been really, really exciting. And it's really great to see people, you know, it started as almost like a therapy for me, you know, to kind of have to get up and go and make a drawing and kind of get involved. But now it's kind of, I want to get online to the WhatsApp group to see what people are producing and why, and how they're taking particular words and extrapolating these kind of images from these words that I wouldn't even think of, or, you know, expanding on different things. So, yeah, I think that's kind of a summation of where I'm at now. As you can kind of see, it's taking this idea of language, education, and the gift through these different projects and different times, kind of really hitting on them and trying to get as many people involved in art making as possible. I think that's been kind of the theme through what I do. That's it.
Thank you very much.
Does anybody have any questions?
I just have some comments, more than questions, really, about how collaborative it is, and how it really resonates with my practice that's looking at dialogue and communication. which obviously relies on other people. And as you know, social beings, it kind of makes sense to make work socially.
Completely.
To some degree. And maybe it is a question actually. I was wondering how, if you saw your work as almost like social experiments, whether you set up kind of parameters.
Most definitely. I think the one that really hits on that is the top left here. I was really thinking about the construct. I had a crit where I was called parasitic because of what I do. I mean, everyone's open to their opinion. I was kind of quite shocked at the time, but I kind of understood where people come from, because they were saying, you know, you're quite controlled in what you do, but I suppose a good experiment has to have a control in some sense. But I think I'm quite open in how I allow. There we go. I said allow. You know, I think that I set it up, so I think it has to interest me. But honestly, the most exciting thing for me is the conversation, and the conversations I've had out of this latest project have been the most exciting, the most interesting, because it's we have a word a day, and that is the parameter, and people have taken it completely their own way. But I was definitely influenced by Willits and his kind of the way he would set up situations to explore, but also explode, you know, to kind of show people what they were doing and how they were doing it. And it's a very difficult tension, and I found it really hard, especially since someone opened my eyes and called me parasitic, to kind of go, well, I hope I'm not being parasitic. And I try and be overly effusive about, you know, giving people the ability to take control of the situation, and take it in a way that they want to.
I read a really interesting text that I'll try and find. If not in this session, I'll send it you. It was about embedding the researcher within the ethnographic process. So rather than being, you maybe already read it, but rather than being somebody that comes in and observes from a sort of different kind of hierarchy, it's embedding in that process. Yeah, I'll find it and send you it. But yeah, I really liked that, because it's that whole sort of thing of when you have a conversation, it's more of a sort of, you know, two-way process or three-way process. And what I've been thinking about recently about the interviews that I do is not necessarily terming them as interviews. So a friend of mine, because I was like, what is it where it's not an interviewer and interviewee dynamic, it's more of a sort of two-way thing? And he said, oh, it's an interlocation. You're interlocators. And obviously, like with my kind of love of language, I was like, oh, this is exciting. So yeah, it's like this kind of, you know, we're having a conversation, we're conversing as interlocators, or interlocation, I think it's interlocators, rather than setting up that dynamic. So, you know, you don't have your researcher and your subjects, you don't have your interviewer and your interviewees. It's more of that kind of framing it as, you know, we're sharing something together, and what do we mutually learn out of that? So I suppose, yeah, there's that kind of tension, I guess. And when you're inviting somebody into a space, whether that's like a physically indoor space or something that you set up, then I think that invitation is really helpful when it's explicit in the parameters of what you're expecting from people. So it's not kind of, or maybe it's not helpful, but maybe it's kind of setting up a kind of fairness, if that makes sense. Do you know what I mean?
Most definitely. And I think, sorry.
No, sorry, go on.
I was going to say, I think that when getting to the large piece, the PIC piece, the performance, interaction and collaboration, it was a logistical thing that I couldn't be an artist in it. And I think that I realized that took me too far away. I was really enjoying the fact that I could set this thing up for these people, but then it took me too far, and I became an administrator without the enjoyment of the creativity and those conversations. So I've kind of not toned it back, but I find different ways. And going online it's interesting. You know, there's a much more utilitarian kind of aspect to being online. It can be international. There's nobody that can. There's very few people that can't get online and produce or understand or or start that conversation. And I hope it will uplift everybody to make art, because that's essentially the bottom of my practice is to encourage people to make and create and understand their creation and have the time and space to be able to do that.
Can I ask a question?
Please.
Where do your people come from? You talked about children, but what about the adults? Is it a particular, is it a broad demographic, or is it, are they all art students or?
Unfortunately, it's pretty much art students or people who make art. A lot of the gallery shows with children, parents will come in and they will engage with it. But it's very interesting. I find that parents always want their children to do really, really well. So if you set something up, they can't help but get involved in what it is that the children make, and they want it to be perfect, or they want it to be whatever they think perfect is. Whereas I come from the opinion where if you're expressing yourself, whether you're 5 or 50, you're still expressing yourself, and that's a journey, and the confidence to be able to express yourself is almost.
It's really interesting what you were talking about before we got disconnected again, about the parental influence on children. So having done various different workshops with children and having children myself, it's something that I'm quite acutely aware of. And I think what's really interesting is when you provide a space for the parents to do something alongside the children. Because often I find that parents that bring their children to galleries and go, oh, there's an activity here for kids, great, fantastic, educational, creative. Yeah. But actually the parents are kind of almost like dying to get involved themselves, but it's something stopping them maybe. So having that space for the parents to do something possibly parallel, or separated roles, or like orchestrating that situation where it's a collaboration rather than that moment where the parents go like, no, you need to do it this way. Just get all these kits, like craft kits for kids, that the worst ones are the ones where it's like way beyond the child's level, so you do end up doing it yourself, and I really hate those. But because you might as well just do it yourself, and like what does the child do?
Yeah, most definitely.
Something. So yeah, I think it's really interesting that if you can orchestrate something where it's almost explicit roles for the parent or carer and the child to make something collaborative. That must be like the magic trick, the kind of.
Oh, I wish there was a magic wand that could just allow the parents to, maybe just a cup of tea or something.
Yeah.
But,
like a relaxed period. Like right, this crash here where we're gonna like magically educate your child, and you get to go away.
But it is very like that. You have parents who are like, oh my goodness, I can go and relax now. I'm leaving my child with you, which legally there's some suspicious. Or you get the others who just want to kind of. But the Franken clothes were I don't know if you remember the image of the kind of pile of clothes, was kind of supposed to be like that because not all children can use the stapler or so on and so forth. So, but they had it almost like a format to understand what they were doing, as it were. They were making clothes, and there's certain parameters around clothes, but the kids could choose whatever they wanted to put together, and they had some great, fantastic. I think the thing is, the kids always have the better ideas. They have no prerequisites, no premonition or what it should look like. So they just they go hell for leather, which is much more exciting, personally.
Yeah, also I can add something maybe. It was wonderful to seeing them all, and I remember my projects about interaction with art in the university for the students who are not related with art, business students and social science students. And this project started at 2016, and we have created, it was a kind of a co-creation process, as you have done as a collaboration. The aim was encouraging encouraging the creativity and the relationship with these out of art students with art. So we have created canvases, common canvases all together, all the students, etc. Then an artist give a shape, and then it become a part of the building and university, and they also always watch that work, and some artists works on the walls, etc., and the students watch them. So I made a research on them at the end. So it's a kind of, for the artist side, when you were working with the art students, yes, it's a part of their working together and creating an artwork together maybe. But in the other side, for the other ones who are not related with the art, the effects of this process and how they are affected especially is very important in terms of closing the gap between art and society, which is really interested in. So yeah, all of them have different effects. I think all they have different creative techniques, methods, and maybe, I don't know if you are working on these effects, and are you making a kind of a research thing on these practices? Maybe it can work to understand these methods' effects on the people and groups, different groups. I just thought, are you doing these types of research?
No, it's something that I'm really interested in. And as I said, I've just given up teaching, as it were. So I'm trying to put myself full-time into education, into making again. And some of the kind of the idea of making bigger projects, or projects that can involve people external to the art world, and try and again look at why we make art and what art is for socially, not just for artists. I think artists understand why they're making art, or they are on the journey to understand that. And I'm interested in finding people that maybe are there's something that they understand tangibly about creativity in their jobs that they do, or their hobbies, but how they can extrapolate that further, how they can make that bigger for them, to understand themselves, because I think that's essentially what we're trying to do, is we're trying to understand ourselves more and more every day. So yeah, no, it's definitely something that I'm interested in.
Yeah, it was wonderful. Yeah, I think, yeah. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I want to pick everybody's brains, really, but that would then turn the conversation entirely over to talking about me. But I'm studying on a painting degree pathway, distance learning. So there's not a lot of collaboration going on with the art making, although there are study events and things. But I seem to have come to a point where I feel I'm thinking of not continuing with the course, because it's very, it sounds silly to say, but academic. Of course it's academic, it's a degree program. And I love reading about other artists and what they're doing, and listening to interviews. But then, you know, I'm a retired person, and I'm thinking I just want to paint. I've forgotten how to paint because I've been doing so much reading and thinking about writing. And you know, part of my reason for doing this study was to challenge myself, to learn more about contemporary art and all this. And clearly I've learned that becoming an artist is about learning more about yourself. And that's which is what you've just said, basically, which is very central to what we're doing. But I'm a bit worried that I've forgotten how to paint, and I could just totally get absorbed in all the reading and research and the writing, and there would be no painting going on. I find it difficult to balance the two things.
I agree. I think it's a very fine balance to navigate. And you know, I suppose, I hope I'm demonstrating, you know, there's it's about making decisions at particular times. And I got to a point where I got quite disillusioned with the education, you know, and what I was doing and the research and the things I was doing with that. And I'm very lucky where I gave myself the capacity and to kind of go, no, I've got to change things up. And some may say that I'm crazy, but you know, it's a hard, but I find it personally a very hard balance to find that kind of that sweet spot between understanding why you're doing what you're doing, that should then technically produce the next piece of artwork, which should then produce the next piece of research, which, you know, but life doesn't work that way, unfortunately. And you kind of, it's a much more higgledy-piggledy kind of creativity comes in the most bizarre ways. Yeah, I don't have a definitive answer for you.
Well, of course not.
But yeah, no, I completely feel what you're saying. And I think it's hard for the educators as well, because deep down, I think they know that the practice needs to come first. But that, you know, and this is one of my issues with the education system, is that the practice doesn't always come first, because you've got to tick these boxes so you can say, well, you get this qualification or this qualification or this qualification. Whereas in actual fact, if we were not looking for a qualification, then you're free to kind of absorb the actual things that you do want to do and kind of go on this journey, which is what I believe it should be. And it's a lifelong journey.
I feel as if, you know, I've learned a lot so far. I've just got on to level 2, but it's taken me 3 years to get here, because it's considered a part-time course, you see, because it's distance learning. And so I feel as if I've learned about how research can lead you down interesting pathways in terms of producing work and being creative. And I think, well, you know, maybe if I went off on my own again, I can be more, you know, I can continue to develop that. But I think having a structure of a degree pathway is quite helpful, isn't it? Really.
It is. But personally, I feel my artwork is about that communication. It's about that conversation. And I don't know about your particular course, but if you're not getting that particular feedback that you need, then I don't know how, maybe through something, you know, like this, you can go and talk to people and present your art and get that feedback, and, you know, and it starts evolving again, because you know, you get to understanding of why you're doing what you're doing.
Yeah.
The crit is a really important part of making as well, I feel, which is why I'd like to play with it. I like to kind of fiddle with it, see what I can kind of experiment with it, as you said, Alice, you know, like set up certain things, certain parameters, and work with them.
Can you say a bit more about that, about how you see, you know, how you define a crit, you know, what goes on? Because, you know, there's, in the small regional student groups that we've had, you know, I think people are a bit frightened of asking the right questions, you know, and I don't know.
And I find people are afraid of talking about their work as well. They find it really hard, because it can be quite a personal thing. You know, people feel that they put a lot of time and effort and money, and maybe they, I don't know, haven't done a particular thing so that they could concentrate on this, and then to have negative feedback can be quite demoralizing. So you don't want to put yourself in that position. And so it takes a lot of strength for people to not only to give up their time to do it, but also to be honest with somebody else about the work that they're making, and take on that negative feedback. And I was talking about being called parasitic. You know, it was pretty hard to take, but I hope that I've learned from it, and I use it in the next thing that I do, so that I, you know, ask more questions. I will try and be as open, as honest as possible, and try and work out the best way to formulate my own work, but also to take on responses from other people, and find different ways like this. You know, Alice has set this up so that, you know, we can talk more about artworks, and that's exciting for me more than anything, is, you know, that ability to talk.
To get different feedback as well at the same time, really valuable for artists to come together.
It's about language as well, isn't it? Because everybody's got sort of, I mean, artists, especially if you've been through education, tend to share a lot of, you know, discourse and be aware of some kind of key theories. But when you're talking to a general audience, we don't always share that language, which makes it interesting, but it also brings challenges as well, I guess. And I suppose on an educational course where, you know, somebody might be really verbose and other people think, as I had it on my BA as well, probably foundation, that people would, you know, talk the talk because they like the sound of their own voice a little bit, or, you know, they wanted to show off. And the impact on I think everybody's been in the room with some of those people, the impact on other people that may be less confident, think, you know, maybe they think, oh, well, I can't talk like that, because I don't have the language. It doesn't mean that people don't have the ideas. It's just how we kind of learn to express them, which I think is the key. So I suppose, like, the way we do that and the way we learn is through communication. But yeah, it's fascinating, isn't it? I think it is.
No, I completely. And that's when I talked about Bourdieu and kind of post 1969 in France. There was a huge kind of uprising of the students, and they tried to usurp this idea of the university and flip it on its head. And Bourdieu talks about taste and value, and they've kind of gone backwards, and they still have a very strict system in France of learning and teaching. But, you know, he talks about class and value and taste and all these things that are kind of mixed into this kind of the value of art, because if you can create a narrative about yourself, then you are more valuable because you are able to be sold. And is that what art should really be about? I don't believe it is. It should be about creativity, being people getting involved, people making, people understanding what they're doing, and therefore understanding a wider remit of artworks. And that takes time and patience and talking and all the things that we're talking about.
Yeah, and I think as well, one of the many roles of art is to challenge the predefined boundaries. So if an art school is saying this is, you know, this structure and this criteria and what art is and isn't, that's almost kind of defeating the whole point. So if you're saying that art fits into this box and you have to tick that box and do the theory and do it in a very kind of like practice theory modular sense, then it doesn't that doesn't work for everybody. But that's what artistic practice is. It's like, it's individual, isn't it? And I think it's all about balance as well. I'm pretty sure that nearly every artist practitioner I know struggles with that balance of, it might be between practice and theory, or it might be between like a paid job and an art practice. But there always seems to be this tension of kind of, I've not had enough time in the studio, I've had too much time in the studio, I don't have a studio. It's that always trying to, you know, make that equilibrium work for you at any given moment in time. And I suppose that's part of the learning process, isn't it? It's like what works for you, and that's not necessarily a fixed thing. So yeah, I think balance is key. Anybody got any comments or queries? Or
thank you for your thoughts anyway. Thank you.
Thanks.
I think one other thing to add is that I find sometimes writing stuff down helps. Like, you know, what is the problem? What is the thought process? Almost like journaling, I guess. So it doesn't really work if you're writing a massive thesis, because that's like part of the problem is you've done too much writing. But almost that kind of like reflective writing process of going, what is the issue here? It could just be sort of like mind maps rather than it being an essay or something. But if the issue is you know, talking about where does the theory sit in my practice, that kind of getting it on the page, maybe, you know, depends how your mind works, but it could be a drawing text-based thing, which could become a piece of work in itself in a way. But yeah, I would recommend some form of like put it on the page process, like journaling or doodling. I don't know. I'm a big fan of doodling.
Right, I'll try that.
I think I like doodling because it's not got a kind of sort of preconceived sort of finished thing. It is just a sort of note form thing. It's not precious. I think that's why I like it. It's just it is. It's like a scribbly mess. Oh, I had another question for you, Oliver, if that's okay. I was going to ask about documenting your work, because I think that when you're working with
that's a whole different lecture.
Like the challenges that present with documenting that kind of like dialogue-based, performative, interactive type of practice. So obviously you've got some photos, and you said you made some zines and publications, but I was wondering like if you did you mention audio? I think did you audio record some of your I wonder if you had like a preferred format or any sort of thoughts on, you know, the challenges inherent with that kind of practice.
Oh, where do I start? I truly believe that, well, I feel that my artworks are performances inherently. So therefore, I find the documentation very, very hard to deal with, because in some sense it's another artwork in its whole form. So I'm quite. I try to be quite concise in what I make, and a lot of my works kind of give away the documentation, or that's the residual. So the people took away the artwork, but I had to have a photograph because the funding came so they needed something to have to show. This latest artwork that I did, the drawing every day, I've got it in a show online, and I've documented the whole WhatsApp group. So there's 20 minutes of just the conversations and some of the images that people have put up. So I have no one preferred way of documenting, and I try and always ask the people who are involved to kind of get involved in that, because it's them, they are creating it in some senses. So I try and really involve them in the process of questioning and understanding what it means to them, and therefore what is the best outcome for them to really kind of grapple with, or to take away as well. Because again, it goes back to this idea of value, but what is it that they're giving, and what is the recompense for that, as it were, you know? And Maus talks about this kind of idea of the potlatch, and you know, it's about giving, but there's always a reason that you're giving, because you want to receive something back. It's like you're going to dinner at someone's house, so you expect a call back to your own house. You know, it's this kind of, this how society works, and the cogs that build the way that we interact, and that's really, really interesting to me. And so yeah, I try and involve people in the documentation and what the documentation means to them, and really produce something for them. Because I don't know, feel like I answered your question, but I kind of went around it.
No, I think you did. Thank you.
Okay.
And I think what you mentioned about this kind of reciprocation as well is really pertinent to my practice. Is like, you know, that kind of what do you give without expecting a return, and how much do you give, and those codes of like societal interaction. So, you know, that on a really kind of basic level, if you ask a question, then you kind of expect an answer, and all those and all those kind of like the nuances that are really interesting to play around with in practice, I think. Yeah.
But those interlockers, you know, as you were saying, you know, it's like it's blocks of language.
Yeah.
And working with non-verbal kids, you know, there's none of that. So that's where I started again, you know, and I work in speech and language school, because it's like, it's, you know, mind is blown, because you have to kind of start from the very beginning, and you've got children who are expressing themselves but don't have verbal language. So it's about really getting into what they are doing in terms of expressing themselves, and trying to give them as a format of a meme, as in, you know, the true meaning of meme, like a piece of information. They're expressing that to you, and you've got to try and work out what that means. It's mind bending, but it's really exciting. I find it exciting anyway.
Me too. Any final questions or comments, or any feedback from this session, other than I'm sorry about the tech and not managing to mute everybody? I'll learn from that one. Like moving forward, has anybody got any thoughts about how this session's run?
I thought it was really exciting. Again, going back to Helen was saying, it's the idea of the crit, but it's a, you know, it's a really, it's nice to have that conversation, especially, you know, being in lockdown and having, you know, the fact that we can communicate across, you know, the world essentially is really exciting, I think. And it gives people like Helen the ability to talk about her work, and, or, you know, find situations to understand our own practices, which is really important.
I find these sessions really stimulating and fascinating, because I hear about how different artists work, and how their work has developed over time. And it's just so, as I say, fascinating and interesting, because, you know, I'm fighting against decorating the world, and plunging into, you know, some sort of conceptual nothingness. But it's just very interesting, and makes my life better, Alice. Thank you.
There we go.
That's great. Well, this is the reason I set it up, is because I wanted to, you know, hear artists talk about their work in my local area, and talk to artists about work. So yeah, it's exactly why I set it up. So yeah, I'm really grateful for everybody that comes along and shares. Thank you very much, Jasmine and Ollie.
Thank you. Yeah.
I'll just edit the video so that you've got your own like separate video, and I'll pop them online.
Thank you.
Minimal editing. I'm not gonna like mess around with cleaning the audio up or anything like that. So it's gonna be all like you know, technological blips and all sorts. Rough and ready. Right, then I'll close the meeting then, if that's okay. And thank you very much for everything.
Very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Take
Thank
care.
you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
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 You.